Method 1, cases, and you don't muck around with the algebra. Method 2, cases, but you do this, which turns into a quadratic, but at least you don't have to muck around with 3 cases, just like 2. Okay? Okay, method number 3. I'm going to graph it. Okay? So how do you go about this? Well, you just think about what's the function. Okay? So if I consider this, what's it going to look like? Okay? So the first thing I'll do is I'll consider it without the absolute values. Now this is a super easy thing to graph. Okay? Think about it. It has a vertical asymptote. Where?
0.
0, because of the denominator. It has a horizontal asymptote. Where?
3.
3, because as you chuck in big numbers, thank you, you get 3 million over a million. So you're going towards 3. So there's 3. Should have put x equals 0. Okay, now what does this thing do in between? Well, you've got this guy over here, this guy over here. What's the intercept? Where does the intercept come from?
Y.
Just comes from the numerator, right? So it's just a third. Okay? Now that I've drawn this guy, I think about what happens when I slap the absolute value signs on. Okay? Now just like before, where it changes, right? The point at which it changes is a third, right? That's where you change over from one version to another. Okay? Now the version that I've got right now, with a plus sign at the front. Okay, which version was that? That's the version where x is greater than a third, right? Does that make sense? So that part I leave. This part is correct. But the rest of it should have a minus sign on it, right? Everything else should get flipped upside down. Okay? So firstly, this part flips, so it goes whoop, okay? And then this guy flips, so he gets a new asymptote down the bottom here, which turns out it doesn't matter where it is, okay? But if you're curious, you just pop it in. Okay? Now, what's the question? Okay, sorry, I should have put that in green. Thank you. What's the question? I want to be less than 2. Okay? So where's 2? Here's 3. So 2 is just a little lower, right? Okay? So now you can see the parts that work, right? Let's get one more color, just for the sake of it. Okay? This whole branch over here, right? The one that I flipped upside down, that's all fine. It's less than 0, right? So it must be less than 2. The other part that I want, let's make it a little Christmassy, is this part in here. How do you find that part? You just solve simultaneously, right? So let's see. When you solve this branch, you get a 5th. It's the same values, right? When you solve this one, you get 1. So which parts do I want? I want less than 0 or between a 5th and 1. And you don't have to write any cases. That's it.
Why do you have to understand the graph of the branch on the left?
Because this branch over here is less than a third. So if it's less than a third, a different rule takes over for the absolute value, which we've been noticing in these cases all along, right? If less than a third, then I put a minus sign on it, the whole lot. Okay. So the question is this part less than x equals a third? Yeah, because x is less than 0. Must be less than a third, right? Whichever method you use, okay, make sure it's thorough. Make sure you end up, you bring all of your answers together and you have a nice neat conclusion tied up in a bow at the end, so that the marker doesn't have to dig through whatever cases you put together or an awful graph and simultaneous equations in order to get there. There's your solution. Okay?